Mission Critical Training for MSPs. Today's webinar will focus on providing customer system integrity. Here at Choice, our goal is to help MSPs navigate the world of security and compliance through our structured assess, address, maintain process. Stay tuned at the end of this presentation to hear about Choice Cybersecurity's service offerings. We are pleased to introduce Ian Trump as our technical security expert. Ian Trump is a certified IT professional with 20 years of experience in IT security and information technology. Previously, he was the global cybersecurity strategist at SolarWinds and is currently the Chief Technology Officer at Occupy Managed Services. Ian works across the business to define, create, and execute security solutions and promote a safe, secure internet for small and medium businesses worldwide. As Chief Technology Officer, Ian has a deep experience with the threats facing small, medium, and enterprise businesses. This research and experience has made him a sought-after cybersecurity resource for conference presentations, press commentary, and keynote addresses worldwide. In recognition of his contribution to IT security, Ian has been named as an Executive Council member. I will answer them at the end of this presentation. Please just enter your questions into the question section in the Go Webinar menu. Ian, take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. I think you cut out a little bit towards the end there, but it's all good, and I picked up my cue. Welcome, everyone. This is the post-ChannelCon, post-DEF CON feature where we're going to talk about all sorts of great MSP things today. We're talking about integrity as a service. If you caught last month, we really talked about availability and how much MSPs have focused on the availability part of the equation of delivering services. And as you can imagine, we're putting it all together into a CIA triad. Now, I had some excellent feedback on the CIA triad. Absolutely believe that it is about 25, maybe 30 years old now. The intent of using this CIA triad as a teaching mechanism is really for MSPs to be able to translate security into an area that their customers can understand. So if you are in a situation where you're going technical to technical, there can be lots of frameworks out there, ISO, NIST, all sorts of other ones. This is really about how I see the way an MSP can bring packages of services together and create a bespoke model for whatever business risk. So as an example, today we're going to be focusing on integrity. Integrity is really about figuring out how do you know that your systems are secure. And this episode is really going to focus on the various different approaches to ensuring integrity. So one of the things about IT systems is trying to understand maintaining what is normal. What is the normal activity that is going on there? So integrity really means there hasn't been an anomalous action, okay? That we're assuring the accuracy and completeness of the information processing. That could be everything from authentication to the validity of the data in the database. We're going to talk about a few case studies today. The other part and parcel to ensuring integrity in systems is really understanding that something cannot be modified or changed or deleted or added without it being detected, okay? So as an MSP, in the environments that you work in, your basic services need to be able to include when somebody has done something different or when a new piece of software has been installed that you didn't install. So what are the big problems that we have in integrity of systems today? Well, as we know, ransomware has certainly been a huge issue for MSPs all over the place, and MSPs are struggling with that. The consequences, though, of an integrity breach where a system is tampered with, especially in the case of medical devices, for instance, really send a chill down my spine. So unlike the traditional type of attack that you might face with, a Trojan downloads a payload of ransomware, we're going to talk about attacks that I think have far more devastating consequences for your customers as an MSP. And again, this comes down to, if something has been changed in the environment, can I detect it? So this is what I like to call the 2mm problem. And this robot that you're looking at basically was able to be exploited so that it changed how it was doing a weld by only 2mm. What's really interesting about this is the kind of problem that manufacturers face that could end up, is certainly if it's detected at the end of the manufacturing chain, could end up in a massive product recall. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of the game changer of not just focusing on availability services, but of focusing on integrity services, because millions of dollars could be at stake in a manufacturer if their system is tampered with. And that's really the big takeaway today, is ensuring about those systems are built in such a manner that if something has gone on inside the connected systems, that you're aware of it. And this really also might introduce elements of change management and go all the way back, 30 years back to the ITIL standards of change management. But this is one of the things that I think MSPs are going to see a lot more of as they start moving into customers that are more complex, customers that might have actual production environments that they're now charged with, if not doing the actual work on the production environment, but all of the supporting parts of the environment. And I wanted to talk about this because this is really a landmark moment in, I'm going to say, in IT services. This is a situation where a robot actually killed somebody, and what you're looking at here is a wrongful death suit against the robot. And I made a little bit of a joke because this robot basically turned this guy into paste. The problem here is, look at the plaintiffs, okay? You've got a Canadian company, Delaware, Ohio. You have a bunch of different jurisdictions. This wrongful death suit will go on in the courts for quite some time, because who's responsible, right? Where does it break down in terms of the responsibility of this particular robot? And how would we even begin to understand whether or not the robot was tampered with? Okay, so in the future, we're going to be confronted with a number of different situations. And here's an example of how a massive heist took place because of a breach in integrity. So between 2011 and 2016, okay, that's 5 years, the web server and credit card processing server were basically broken into, and every time there was a transaction, the bad guys got an email with the credit card information and the personal information the victims had put in to the website page, okay? So this was 5 years. It went undetected for 5 years. This is exactly what I'm talking about, because that could have been tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 or more actual credit card transactions that were intercepted by the bad guys. So one of the ways that we can start off with our journey on integrity is looking at our customer systems from the external view. Okay, so what I'm talking about is what would the attacker see at your particular customer. So as an example, if they have a web service, if they have a VPN, if they have a number of different services hanging out there on the internet, those would be the kind of things that I would want to know are, of course, patched and updated, that are secure. And if somebody is trying to break into them, I have constructed my system in such a way as to understand that vulnerability and mitigate it. Right? Could be at the firewall, could be with some geo IP filtering, could be you're only accepting traffic from a particular subnet. Gone are the days where you can put a service out there on the internet and just expose it to the entire internet. That's an incredibly dangerous maneuver. I would start looking at regional and geographic controls on those particular types of access, especially access that takes you into the core of the network. So clearly, the sudden appearance of a new port open on your customer system would be a concern. You want to use Nmap or traffic analysis with Wireshark to find out why something has changed in the customer's infrastructure. Now, what I'm going to say is we are going to make sure that you can get this deck so that you can take a look at these scans. So Octopi Managed Services is my MSSP back in Canada. Turns out we're in the top 25 customers of SolarWinds MSP. And this, what you're looking at here, is a couple of scans that we've automated from an external server. It could be one that we have in the cloud that looks at all of our customers' external facing services and makes sure that there's no new ports, or ports that used to be there are now gone. So what we're doing is kind of a remote port scan against our customers to make sure that nothing new or scary has showed up. And you can see that we've got the various batch files that we use in order to do that. The only thing you really need is Nmap, and you can set yourself up with that as well. Now, one of the neat things here is that we've done is we're running it from a Windows box. If you look at the first block of code, we have an event create. So what we're doing there, and this is where it gets pretty slick, is we're creating an event in the event log, ID 501. We just picked that at random. The description is Nmap port scanning found new open ports, else echo no open ports found. We're putting that into the event log so we can track it in the Windows event log, and we can build a custom event log check for that with the SolarWinds MSP dashboard. So completely automated remote port scan. And we can see this is the actual last batch file that runs that compares the two scans. Okay, and then we've got the actual target underscore IP.txt, which is the input. That's where we put our customer IP addresses. So basically what we're doing is we're making sure that nothing new or old, or nothing new or something that should be there is now not there, by using some pretty simple codes. The reason for this is that something new showing up may not even be related to your MSP. Could be a new piece of hardware that somebody's brought in, could be a vendor tampering with the system. There could be a lot of reasons for it, but certainly an MSP that is concerned about the customer integrity is going to be looking fairly regularly at the outside of their customer. So internal integrity of your systems is critical, and I dropped a little Magic the Gathering card there for any of you folks. Here's where the whole ecosystem of different products and services really trying to make a huge difference, okay? So this really now, internal integrity is about your logging, and it's about how you're going to manage those loggings. Now, some folks use just event logging. Some like there's a SolarWinds corporate product called Event Logger. IDS, intrusion detection systems, IPS, intrusion prevention systems, data loss prevention, SIEM technology, right? Security incident event monitor. And again, what we're trying to do is determine why something has changed in the internal part of the network. And one of the things that really comes to light is this particular case study, where March and September, these guys were brute forcing law firms. They were brute forcing the Outlook web access portals and the VPNs. And as you can see, this was from the indictment, 100,000 occasions, 100,000 brute force attempts on these portals. So this is where I'm talking about, because this is an exact example of how bad guys are going to get in the system. It's a very, very noisy attack. And these guys actually compromised 8 law firms using the same exact technique. Now, this is all that it would have taken to identify that if you had a SIM or if you were parsing the log looking for 4625. Okay, from 2008 R7, Windows 7, 2012 Server, Windows 8.1, and Windows 2016 and Windows 10. 4625, an account failed to log on. You would have seen that in the log 100,000 times. Okay, so there's the exact very noisy attack. But what is disturbing is 8 out of 8 of these law firms failed to notice tens, if not hundreds of thousands of failed login attempts as the bad guys were attempting to brute force their way in. So I just kind of pulled this out as a classic example of where one check, one firewall alert, or one SIM rule can make a huge difference in making sure that your exposed services are safe. Okay, and again, what I just parsed out there is that you get the workstation name, you get the source network address, and then you get some useless information about the source port, which is usually random, as you guys know. Okay, but again, very, very simple integrity check, looking for accounts that have failed to log on. So the other thing that we did and that we built is we counted DLLs and executables on the workstation. Okay, now this sounds pretty trivial, right? But again, this is where we're looking for in environments where folks have the ability to install their software because you haven't been able to remove local administrative privileges, or you can't for whatever reason. What we're doing here is we're looking for new executables or new DLLs loaded onto a workstation. Okay, and again, what we're doing here is we're using the event create to create these IDs in the event logs. So of course, what could we do? We could get our SIM, or we could get the SolarWinds MSP dashboard to alert us if any of these events are created. Okay, again, what I'm talking about is really making sure that my workstations and servers have integrity. The easiest and quickest way to do that is if you have, I don't know, 155 DLLs one day, and now you have 157 DLLs, and nobody has logged into that server, you might want to take a look and find out what those are. And that's where we had it listing in the DLL count.txt files, so you could go back and see what the heck happened. Okay. So here's another example of that integrity issue on workstations. So NotPetya, as you know, was a huge ransomware attack, and companies like FedEx and Maersk, the shipping company, are still doing some cleanup related to that. But what was really interesting about this is the issue became, and one of the reasons why NotPetya was so effective was there was a script that pulled down a number of very common hacking tools, including Memcached. Memcached, if you don't know what it is, it's a tool that allows you to enumerate the LSASS process and pull out administrative credentials and any other credentials that might have been used on that particular workstation. Extremely powerful tool. Then what happened is those credentials were passed to PsExec and WIMIC in order to spread throughout the inside of the network. So as an example, if you have servers or protected workstations, you want to make sure that no one is uploading any tools, and if they do, you definitely want to investigate why that happened. So let's talk a little bit about this attack. Again, incredibly noisy. So after brute forcing their way into these law firms, what did these guys do? Well, in this one case, they exfiltrated 40 gigabytes of data over 8 days. Okay, so for 8 days, that law firm's information was being siphoned out of it. I find it amazing that either the network was always not great at that law firm and nobody noticed that all of this data was coming out of it. Again, basic bandwidth monitoring, people. Again, you know, very, very classic. Take a look at those firewall log rules. They would have shown this network connection, you know, to some place up for days. Again, I just can't believe it. Creation of large files. Before these guys exfiltrated the data, they actually created a zip file that was obviously around 40 gigabytes, if not maybe even, well, probably somewhere between 35 and 40 once you factor in compression. Again, large changes in the disk space, right? If you're building a really big zip file, it's going to have two triggers. The file itself being super large, but also using up a tremendous percentage of the disk space in a very short period of time. Again, this was an FTP exfiltration. So why wasn't there a firewall rule blocking FTP exfiltration from the server? Because normally servers do not FTP stuff. Okay, the normal Active Directory server or Exchange server does not make FTP connections outbound. And the fact that they installed a number of programs onto the server and that didn't raise any eyebrows is outrageous as well. So as you can see, in the integrity story, it's really about building detective tools to understand how the bad guys are going to come at you. And these guys, I got to tell you, they got done for insider trading, but the techniques that they used were amateur hour. There was nothing stealthy about this at all, but 8 out of 8 law firms that they attacked failed to detect any of this. So the other thing that we really want to talk about here too, in terms of maintaining the integrity of the information system, is really about dialing back the amount of applications that we have on the workstations and really locking down. You can use the native app locker capability. It's gotten a lot better in Server 2016, but you really want to lock down and whitelist applications or blacklist anything it can't figure out what it is. So there's a couple of different schools here that are really neat. There's super lame commercials. PCmatic, I think you guys probably have heard of them. Excellent and very interesting technology. What they've done is they've essentially whitelisted all the known applications from manufacturers and they blacklist everything else. So their technology kind of flips it on its side. Instead of saying what's allowed to run, they have defaulted to what's not allowed to run. And if it's not in their database, they don't allow it to run. So there's two different techniques of basically of locking down systems. I think it's really, really cool. And then of course, removing administrative rights. Again, that really helps you with the integrity of the system because people can't make changes, people can't undo or disable security without, some sort of record of that happening, right? And again, what you have to do is work with your businesses to find out if the integrity, and a great example is healthcare, where the integrity of the healthcare system is the most important thing, okay? Balanced with confidentiality for sure, but you have to make sure that the test results haven't been tampered with. And so I think that there's really great opportunities for MSPs here to really focus on removing administrative rights. Now, breaking news. I wish I had that little breaking news soundbite, but we're gonna change tack here a little bit. We're gonna talk about the main threat, in my mind, to the integrity of your systems, and that is passwords. And NIST has gone back to 2003. I believe the guy's name is Bill Brenner, he was an analyst at NIST, and he basically said, "I'm sorry, I got it wrong." Which, we're now at 2017, he's had a little while to think about it. But here's what's really interesting to me is that you can have a completely easy to guess password, but as long as you have two-factor authentication, chances are that's going to give you really great security. But in cases where you don't have the option to put two-factor authentication in front of it, what NIST has said is that we only now want to change a password if we think it's been compromised, okay? So let that sink in. So that it's changing your password every 90 days, it's actually counterproductive. It generates extra work for password resets and all that kind of things. And it has basically caused users a heck of a lot of grief. So the new direction from NIST is no more periodic password change requirements. Also, the algorithmic complexity song and dance, okay? Uppercase, lowercase, mixture of symbols and numbers. Again, this apparently has often resulted in worse passwords, or what we like to call representative passwords, where basically it's exclamation mark, capital Q, small a, small z, and X, or something like that, that is really looks like a complex password, but it's not, because it's a pattern on the actual computer keyboard that works. So this is where we've now seen a big change again, is that get away from the complexity song and dance. There's a really neat way of doing this that gives you the right amount of entropy, and that is 3 little words. You know, 3 words that are not related to each other in any way, with spaces in between, makes a fantastic password. And then this one is really interesting too. This is where NIST has really come to the table and said, you know, using passwords that are common or have been compromised is bad, right? Wow, newsflash, using a compromised password is a bad idea. So the idea now is to really think about passwords and auditing of passwords on systems. And this is where, you know, for MSPs that are managing many amount of customers, something like Passportal, where it's a pass management solution with auditing and all that kind of stuff, allows you that flexibility to use complex passwords, but not be, I'm going to say, challenged with recording and managing them at the MSP level. And then, of course, there's a huge amount of user password managers. Now, the reason I'm talking about password managers is in the NIST directive, they now recognize them as being part of good security, good cyber hygiene. So that's pretty exciting to see this technology sort of finally, you know, after so many years, be recognized for the security value that it brings. And I just did a quick search for a PCMag article that was, you know, comparing all of them. And you can see here that it's not a super expensive thing, but it provides excellent security. So want to talk a little bit about integrity and IoT, because as we can see, we've had some major issues with IoT in the last little while, right? Brickerbot in April, going all the way back to the first Myra code leak in 2016, and then the Dyn DNS attack shortly thereafter. This was because many people have put, not you MSPs, but many consumers have put their IoT devices directly on the internet and hadn't changed default passwords. Or if they did change the default password, they changed it to something retarded like password, or really cyber, $, okay? So the guys that built Myra searched out about 60 common passwords that you would use and were able to assemble a botnet of millions of devices as a result of that. So my rules for IoT, I just came up with them last night because I was thinking about, you know, how can I do something cool around IoT and integrity? Isolate on the network, so that's number 1I. If it doesn't need to talk to the entire internet, it shouldn't, and it should be segmented off. There are 2 reasons. One, you can have firewall rules to make sure that it is not blasting out a whole bunch of attacks on people. You can monitor the bandwidth easier, and you can, if you're using a managed switch, you can do a network tap on it to see what type of information it's communicating to where, and find that all of your DVR equipment is sending its images to China for some unknown reason. Or the DIJ drones, which apparently were sending a copy of everything that the US military looked at back to China. Interesting. O is baseline the operation of the device. So what I'm talking about here is, again, if you look at the device, what is the normal type of traffic that you should see from it? So maybe the normal type of traffic will be some ARP requests and maybe HTTP or HTTPS, or, you know, a protocol that makes sense, like maybe some DNS. But what you should not see are a bunch of other protocols like ICMP or NTP that might indicate this thing is now blasting away happily at some sort of target. So baseline the operation of it, understand what its normal activity is. And T, tamper-proof the device. This really comes down to making sure it's patched and updated and making sure that you have changed the default password to something not a little bit more sophisticated than passwords with $2. So one of the other things in terms of maintaining integrity is to really get on top of vulnerabilities and exploits. I highly recommend that you subscribe to US CERT, and I highly recommend that you also subscribe to Full Disclosure, because those two sources will tell you when you have an IoT device or when you have a web server or an application server that now has a critical vulnerability. And that's the kind of thing you probably want to get on top of right away, because if you don't, then you will have an integrity problem. I want to rant a little bit about Microsoft SMB-v1. As you know, this was part of the exploit for Eternal Romance and Eternal Blue that basically ripped apart the internet using the WannaCry ransomware payload and then NotPetya shortly thereafter. So this was not a great moment for anyone, but I really wanted to use this as a teaching opportunity because it shows the difference between what vulnerability management is and patch management, okay? So here we are with a situation where 56 days from before the attacks happened, we had a lot of warnings. We had a lot of warnings from US CERT that said, basically, there's some exploits going on for SMB-v1. They recommended at the time that you block TCP port 445 and the related protocols on UDP ports 137 to 138, that includes NetBIOS and LANman, and TCP port 139, which I think is actually NetBIOS. I might have missed one there. Okay, block it at the firewall. What does that mean? It means write a firewall rule that doesn't allow those protocols to the WAN side, okay? Now, if you can actually believe some folks out there, they didn't have a deny rule in their firewall, and as a result of this, they got exploited by this Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance, okay? So then what happened is we had the patches issued from Microsoft, and I believe, I'd have to check it, but I think we had 28 days from, so 56 days where we were warned, and then 28 days before the attacks of WannaCry happened, we had patches. So again, one simple firewall rule could have saved those businesses from the exploits Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance, all right? That to me is vulnerability management. Patch management is getting those patches into the machine so that you're not vulnerable to begin with. So we've done all this stuff. We focused this presentation this time on integrity as a service. Now we need to include audit as a service because you have to figure out where you're at. And here's where MSPs can pull together. Choice can become a great broker of MSPs to do those third-party audits of each other's work. So I've actually been asked by SolarWinds MSP to talk about compliance and the future of compliance, GDPR and a bunch of others like HIPAA and PCI DSS. I've been asked to present in Orlando, London, and Amsterdam on this subject. I am advocating for MSPs to partner up and audit each other's works. This is because these are actually fun, because what you can do is you can improve customer security by making the customer pay for the security audit because they need it. They need to know that their systems are that have integrity because they might get an insurance discount if they have cyber insurance. They might need it because of audits or regulatory authorities. I like to say that pretend data breach is much better than real data breach. I think everyone can believe it. And you can call it whatever you want as a service. You can call it a pen test. You can call it a vulnerability assessment. You can use risk intelligence to give you a picture in terms of a monetary value. All sorts of options there. Failure on the scanners and audit is an option. In fact, I am worried when a scan or an audit or a pen test comes back with nothing. because I think they've missed something. This is continuous improvement, and this is how MSPs can really be successful. Another thing that I highly recommend is registering your customers' email addresses for Have I Been Pawned? Because if that customer has used an email address somewhere else and they've been data breached, rest assured that password may provide access into those systems and havoc. This is a free service. You can register your email address with them, and they will let you know if it's been detected, if there's a breach, where that email address has been used. It's brilliant. I incorporated into a logic card in the SolarWinds MSP dashboard, where we were checking all of our user IDs that were in the SolarWinds MSP dashboard system against Have I Been Pawned? Thycotic, I put these guys up here because I wrote some great content for them. They have a bunch of free IT tools to help you with password auditing and password strength auditing. I highly recommend them as well. I wanted to just kind of bring this whole thing home with a bit of an example around PCI DSS 3.0. So, here we have basic outlines of what the goals are. So if I was an MSP and I knew I had a business, right, that had PCI data, and most of them do in one form or another, I would provide a bespoke package around these business goals, and then the PCI DSS requirements would be my best practices or services that I was going to use to make sure the business meets those goals. And I strongly bring your attention to regularly monitor and test networks. See, this is what I'm talking about, where you can set up a quid pro quo system. Things like protect all systems against malware and regularly update antivirus software or programs. This is all stuff that you can do. Very, very easy. But I just wanted to kind of bring this up because this is really, I think, where the bread and butter is, the absolute huge market opportunity, because most MSPs, you're kind of doing all of this already. So that's really exciting. So summing up here, we have MSPs that have a good idea and the technological tools to understand system integrity for the business will instantly have an advantage in helping customers pass an audit and detect compromise. And so what are the areas to focus on? Architecture, segmentation and firewall rules for sure. Best practices like password managers and 2FA, technology, event logging and alerting, and SIEM. And I think Choice Cybersecurity has a partner that they work with in order to provide SIEM as a service. So certainly ask Steve more about that. And I like building cyber traps, like booby traps. So tempting documents and folders, and then stick a bunch of audit on it and a bunch of alert on it. And that way you know if somebody's in there tampering with your systems. And with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Choice Cybersecurity, and thank you for your time today.
Ian, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I would like to take a minute to tell you about Choice Cybersecurity. Our founder, Steve Rekovitz, owned and operated an MSP for over 20 years. Last year, he sold his MSP to become a pure play cybersecurity company. Sorry, I'm just trying to show you my screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was me. I kind of flipped it back to you.
Good.
You got it. All right, perfect.
So we found that MSPs and their clients were just winging it when it came to security and compliance. So we created the structured, repeatable process, assess, address, maintain. Through our turnkey solution, learn how to approach your clients, perform risk assessments, bring your clients up to an acceptable level of risk, and maintain an acceptable level of risk. Assess. It all starts with the risk assessment. We have the most comprehensive risk analysis offering on the market. We use our in-depth scans to show overwhelming evidence to uncover and reveal gaps and vulnerabilities. Address. Those are the layers of security to bring your clients up to an acceptable level of risk. Once we know the client's gaps and vulnerabilities through a risk assessment, we can recommend 35 or more different categories and security layers through projects to bring them up to an acceptable level of risk. Maintain. Those are the products and services to maintain an acceptable level of risk through monthly recurring service offerings.